This is Transcast from the MetTrans Transportation Center. I'm Matt Kaplan. The Port of Los Angeles is the largest container facility in the United States. Looking down on it from her office at the port's Nerve Center is Dr. Geraldine Knatz. Dr. Knatz became the facility's first female executive director in 2006. She started her career nearly 25 years ago as an environmental scientist working for the port, but soon began gaining the experience and expertise that would see her rise to second in command of the neighboring Port of Long Beach. Now she is responsible for the operation and growth of a gargantuan $500 million operation that sees about $200 billion in cargo volume each year. 7,500 acres of land and water are divided by 43 miles of waterfront. Her 5 years at the helm have at times been a wild ride, thanks largely to a shaky economy, but she has kept the port moving forward and has led the adoption of many innovations, including the Clean Air Action Plan that has reduced pollution by an amazing 50% in just 5 years. Late last July, Dr. Knatz invited Transcast to her office for a wide-ranging conversation about her job, what the port has accomplished, and the challenges it faces in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. Dr. Knatz, thank you so much for allowing us to come into your office here above the Port of Los Angeles and talk to you for a few minutes about your job and the kinds of challenges and accomplishments that we've seen in the Port of L.A. and your sister port, the one a little bit farther south there that you're on pretty good terms with. So thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to do this.
As you know, in part, our mission is to open up, in a sense, the ports to the community. So we're probably talking to an industry audience, but hopefully we've got a few people out there who maybe pass by the ports every day and maybe have had the same experience that I've had, that unless you go inside, you really don't get a feel for just how massive an operation you're in charge of here. I mean, does it still amaze you or blow you away, the extent of what is happening right out the window here?
Definitely, yes. As a matter of fact, if you see me get distracted during this podcast, it's because I'm watching the ships going up and down the main channel. But one of the things I really enjoy doing is bringing people from the greater Los Angeles area out on a boat cruise. And they come down, and, you know, many of them are experienced business people. They may even be doing business through our port, but they've never been here, and they're just amazed at the scale and the magnitude of the operation.
And then I suppose there are people across the United States who just somehow think that television they've just bought, that flat screen, has somehow magically appeared at that Best Buy or Target or wherever they picked it up, and are apparently unaware of the kind of infrastructure that's in place to get it from there to there.
Most people don't understand that the goods that they buy every day come through a port. And so at LA and Long Beach, 45% of the goods coming into the United States come through our port complex. I can remember being with some fellow port directors, and one of the port directors said at a public hearing for one of his projects, a woman got up there and said, "What do I need a port for? I have Walmart." And that's just an example that people don't realize that, you know, most of their goods have to get moved on a transportation system. And that's why, from a national perspective, our transportation system is extremely important.
That figure you just gave of 45% of the goods that come in from elsewhere into this country, that's also incredible considering, these are the two largest ports in the country, but there are a lot of other ports. That number is amazing.
It is, and we've been able to trace goods coming through our port to every congressional district in the United States. So no matter where you live in the United States, something has come through the Port of Los Angeles or Long Beach.
And you're talking about even on the East Coast, obviously.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But there are plenty of ports elsewhere around the border of this nation and neighboring nations that would love to take a piece of that market share from L.A. and Long Beach. They may get a little bit of help with that, at least some of the ports on the eastern half of the United States, with this development, the expansion of the Panama Canal, which is underway right now. That, of course, inspired a lot of discussion that we've led out of the CITT. about the challenges that L.A. Long Beach and other West Coast ports may face when much bigger ships are able to get through that canal.
Well, yes, the Panama Canal has been there for a long time. So there was always goods that had the potential to move to the canal. I think as the ships got larger, that made Los Angeles and Long Beach very competitive in terms of the fact that most of our goods are coming from the Pacific Rim. But I think we have to recognize the competitive landscape that we face in the future is changing. Yes, there are other ports that are really looking at our market share, not only on the West Coast, but on the West Coast of Canada. So there's investments being made by the Canadians to attract cargo away from Los Angeles and Long Beach. Our biggest market that we serve is right here in the Southern California and the southwestern area. Our second biggest market is Chicago. So the Canadians look at, things can get to come in through British Columbia ports, go across Canada on their rail system and drop right down into the Chicago area. And, they're closer to many of the ports in the Asian countries than we are. So that is a competitive threat. Additionally, once the canal is widened, the bigger ships can pass us right by and service those East Coast ports. We're watching very closely what goes on with those East Coast ports. Many of them need significant investment in dredging projects. And those projects, which are undertaken by the Army Corps of Engineers, take a long time to deliver. So all of these things play into the balance of where the cargo would go. It's not just the canal opens and all of a sudden things are going to ship. It doesn't work that way. It's a combination of factors that makes a shipper decide where the cargo is going to go, or an importer or retailer to make the decision, I want it to come through Southern California or I want it to come through the canal. It involves rail pricing. It involves the facilities. One of the advantages LA and Long Beach has is we can serve every market in the United States. The transportation network here and the investment in the facilities here are not matched by any port complex anywhere in this country, even if all those dredging projects and infrastructure projects on the books now for other port areas go forward, we'll still have superior facilities here. And we've got a great market. A big local market, and that tends to draw the cargo into this port complex. But that being said, we have to really be careful about our pricing, about our commitment to infrastructure. All of those things have to continue. We can't take a break. We have to keep making the investments here. And things that we put in place in our Clean Air Action Plan, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we did some of those things at a time when business couldn't move to another location. And so going forward, there may be more opportunities for businesses to make the decision, I don't want to deal with that environmental issues. I may want to go someplace else. So we've got to be very cognizant of that. Fees that we put in place were marketed against us. There were other ports say, come here, you don't have to comply with those new Clean Air Action Plan regulations at LA and Long Beach. And so the way I would look at it is, take your cargo to, that's changing around the country too. I think a lot of ports are recognizing they have to clean up.
And it's hard to imagine that the people who live near those ports, who certainly can see the successes here in the ports of LA and Long Beach, are going to want to say, we love our competitive advantage, the fact that we're having to live with all this stuff that's been taken out of the air and water by those folks in California.
I think I do recognize that ports around the country don't have to do exactly what LA and Long Beach had to do, but they have to do something. I think part of the reason we're so vocal about our efforts here is we want to spread the word. We've worked closely with regulatory agencies. EPA looks to us as a model. We've won many national awards as a result of what we've done here. They've seen that things can be done. And once it starts to happen, it's a little bit easier for the other ports to implement things. If you're a small port and you have a really limited market, it's hard for you to decide, I'm going to impose some really draconian regulation here on my port, because they'd lose business overnight. We have the ability to actually take some steps because there weren't other ports who could pick up our market if it decided to move someplace else. So we broke new ground. That makes it easier for the other ports to follow.
Do you think that the ports have now embraced the green port movement, the clean air, and so on? Because obviously it was a somewhat painful process to get underway, and there were some outside pressures. But it does seem to have become part of the culture, at least in my view.
I think so. Not all ports have the kinds of environmental programs we do. I think there's a greater recognition of that, and I think even internationally. I'm heading the World Port Climate Initiative, where the big ports around the world have come together. And, when we started our cleanup efforts here, the focus was on health risk, diesel particulates, that stuff in the air that could have a health impact on the surrounding community. If you go to Rotterdam, go to Netherlands, you go to European ports, they're really concerned about greenhouse gases. If you live behind a dike, as you do in the Netherlands, you are worried about sea level rise. So it's been interesting that in different parts of the world, the emphasis is a little bit different. But what we found is when you clean up nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides, usually there's a corresponding decrease in greenhouse gases as well. So we've been able to share ideas among the port community internationally. And we're actually going forward with some internationally based programs that we're trying to bring the maritime industry along.
Let's talk a little bit more about that competitive landscape that you talked about. First of all, before we get to some of the challenges that you're facing, what are some of the other advantages that we may have here in Southern California? You talked about infrastructure, but I think you were primarily talking about roads. Do we have other things that are going to tell shippers overseas, yeah, LA and Long Beach still look like pretty good places to be?
Yeah, actually, part of the investment that we make in this infrastructure, my goal is to spend $1 million a day in capital improvements on this port complex. If I don't feel I'm spending $1 million a day to keep this physical plant up, then I feel like I'm not doing my job. We essentially have to rebuild this port from top to bottom every 10 years because the wear and tear on the facilities as a result of the truck movements and container movements and cargo handling, it's a constant capital investment. So we spend a lot inside the port complex, but you need to also have the infrastructure to move the goods out through the Los Angeles basin to get to the rail yards, to get the stuff to the East Coast and to all those different congressional districts. And so that's why you've seen in the last, say, 5 or 6 years is you've seen the two ports and the two port executive directors engage more with the regional transportation authorities. We're trying to build a coalition around goods movement to get everyone to support the investment in goods movement. It was really remarkable some years ago when the citizenry in California voted for bond measures to support the freight infrastructure system. That meant people understood that, hey, there's 1 million jobs in California that are tied to goods movement, and that's important. So as a result of that, we're going to be able to replace the Gerald Desmond Bridge. 15% of all the cargo coming in and out of this country goes over that bridge. The bridge wears a diaper to catch falling debris. We have another bridge that comes off Terminal Island where all our heavy cargo facilities are that needs to be totally rebuilt, and the state is going forward and doing that. So there's money now to do those 2 bridge projects. Longer term, we need to look at additional improvements in the basin, rail infrastructure, the railroads. We talk about the canal, and then it's, a $4 or $5 billion project. But the Western railroads spend that much every year keeping their whole system maintained and making the capital improvements in their system. So you have major investments by the Burlington Northern and the Union Pacific in the infrastructure needed to get those goods to the Chicago area and to the East Coast. And so that goes on continuously. We may not make a big deal about it like there is about the canal, but that investment occurs every year in that system.
As you look at other ports around the world, the ones that you really admire, Europe, China, I hear Shanghai. It's become the number one port in the world, right?
Yes.
Do you see things that you look at and you say, boy, we've got to achieve that here?
You see productivity levels at other ports that we don't obtain here, and we may never get to those, but I think going forward, pretty much LA and Long Beach are built out. It's not like we're going to be building large new land masses in this bay. We're pretty full. So most of our improvements are going to be improving the efficiency of our existing land areas. So how do you do that? We have customers that are looking at automated systems. There's a lot of issues associated with that. Labor's going to be concerned about jobs. Look at a port like Shanghai, and they want to build an island for container facilities, and they just start building. And for us, we produce reports, environmental reports that are 6,000 pages long now, to talk about the impacts of what we do. So we've been able to figure out how to navigate that environmental process to get projects approved and how to be a good neighbor, but it's still very time consuming, and we've developed a process that's not user-friendly for the general public. I think to put out a 6,000 page report, that's supposed to be for the average citizen to understand what we're doing, it's really written by a bunch of lawyers for another bunch of lawyers, and unfortunately the general public is down here trying to figure out what's going on. So I think we have our work cut out for us in terms of greater outreach with the community, being that good neighbor, getting them to understand what we're all about. And a lot of that, I think, is bringing people back into the port to either work here, to come and, as we're doing along our San Pedro waterfront, to recreate, to have fun here, to watch what's going on. That's part of a longer-term strategy to get people to support the ports.
So not just the general public, though, but I wonder about the awareness, if you think that public officials uptown here, right up the freeway, the 110, but also Sacramento and in Washington, if you're seeing the awareness of the goods movement industry that you think is going to be important to help this industry stay competitive.
Yes, I think I see it's increasing over time. I think what you've seen in the last few years that you wouldn't see years ago was, if we held a public hearing on a project, we have organizations like the LA Chamber of Commerce, the Central City Association in downtown LA, coming down, driving 20 or 30 miles to come and speak at a public hearing. You didn't have that type of activity before. What you're seeing in our public hearings is you're getting a balanced mix. You're getting community members who are concerned about impacts. You're getting business people coming talking about jobs. That's good. That's a balance. It's not all one side or all the other side. That's how things had kind of come. The pendulum was swinging from one side to the other, and really we need a balance. And I think we've achieved that. I think we've shown the communities we can clean up the operations, we can grow the port, and we can be cleaner while we're increasing our cargo throughput. And we're making investments in the community. We created a community benefit fund that is tied to the growth of this port. So as we grow each year, there's issues associated with living by a big port that the locals have to deal with. And so we make an investment into community benefit fund. We've spun off a nonprofit. That board has just started meeting, and we want them to do good things in the community. But it gives the community a stake in our growing.
How about at the federal level? I mean, they don't have the same kinds of community concerns that your neighbors do. As you look at national goods movement policy, do you think there's room for improvement?
I think there's definitely room for improvement. I think there are some people in Washington who really understand that the competitive landscape is changing. I have to tell you, we went to Washington with a PowerPoint that the Canadians had put together to market their national system. They brought together the federal government, the provincial government, the local government, the railroads, the ports, on a national strategy to serve America's heartland. So, they want to eat our lunch. And we went back to Washington and we laid it out for them. Look at what the Canadians are doing. It's a best practice. And if we don't wise up, our second largest market, which is tied to jobs in this California market, is going to go to the Canadians. And so we're going to lose those jobs. we suffer for the lack of a national goods movement strategy. What we keep saying to the legislators in Congress and to the Federal Department of Transportation and the Secretary of Transportation is we need a national strategy. I believe the national government has to step back and look at the country and say, where are the important corridors? Where do we need to make investments? It may be in the corridor serving LA and Long Beach now, but ultimately, it could be in the South Atlantic because LA and Long Beach can't do it all forever. We need to have systematic program of investments to support goods movement. And so in some ways, it's kind of shocking that there's not the investment in dredging the ports in the Atlantic. They should be dredged. It's going to take a long time, but we have to start those investments now. And here's the executive director of the Port of LA saying you should make those investments, but come on, we need a national strategy. The money comes to LA and Long Beach to deal with our infrastructure projects first, and then ultimately, at some point, we're going to be built out. And then the government needs to be thinking about where do they make the next investments. They don't have that national capital plan. They don't have that national vision. And if we don't, we're going to be outcompeted by Canada first and then Mexico.
Would you let me know if you get a nice thank you card from the head of the port in Norfolk, Virginia for the statement you just made?
So I make that statement a lot. It's just, I think as Americans, we need to support our national economy. And we're driving the freight system now here at LA and Long Beach, and we need investments here. But then, it's beyond our market. It's the rail corridors and the grade separations to move the cargo further east. And then we need to be looking at where, we're connected to Chicago. That's our inland port. Chicago. That's where a lot of our stuff goes. It goes to Memphis. It goes all over. But, you need to look at the infrastructure on a nationwide basis.
You mentioned the national economy. We're coming out of, it appears, some pretty bad years. Does it look like we're coming out of this recession, at least as far as your industry is concerned? And as this happens, is that going to, pardon the expression, lift all boats?
We went through about 18 months of continual growth, and we were pretty excited about that. We bounced back after the recession much quicker than I thought we were, but I have to be quite frank, I'm still worried. You look at housing right now. Last month we were down 12.9%, our first dip in 18 months. Sitting here, I still look out the window and I look at the ships. And I see if the back end is empty when it comes up the main channel. It's like a barometer. That's what it looked like in the depths of the recession. And yesterday I watched a ship come in and I thought, oh my gosh, that ship is not full.
Wow.
And I've talked to the customers. They say the ships are coming in at about 75% full. That's not what we want. We're starting to see some signs of things that happened before. Overcapacity. A lot of new ships came into the market. There's an overcapacity. It affects rates. And when that affects rates, people start looking at how they can move their cargo in different ways. And housing still has not really turned around here in the LA basin. People have to recognize 30% of all the stuff coming in those containers is household goods. Furniture is our number one import. And if houses are not moving, selling, that affects our business. So there was a lot of talk a year ago, will there be a double dip recession? And you hear economists say, no, that's not happening. But housing went up and then it's down in a second dip. I'm not an economist, so I'm not the best person to say. I just look out my window and I look at the ships. And, we started seeing the impact before the recession rippled through before. So I don't know if our decrease this last month is an anomaly. Last year, June was our huge month. We grew like 32%. So we compared June to June. And so when you have a huge growth, it's hard to sustain that. So we thought, hey, we'll probably see some flat numbers, but that still would be good. But I'm going to wait and see. We were very cautious in doing our budget this year for our own agency. We wanted to make sure whichever way it goes, we're okay. and we've done that. So I need to see more data. I want to keep watching. The customers tell me that they hope things will pick up end of August, September, peak season.
Because that's when all the stuff's coming in for the holidays.
Yeah, that'll be a good barometer. How big is our peak season? Last year, our peak season was earlier, and that was a surprise. So, we're watching very closely.
Well, I hope my optimism wasn't too premature, but it certainly sounds like it's no time to relax, to think that...
No. We have to be diligent. We have to keep an eye on spending. We have to focus on the customers and what they need. And, last year we had about $35 million in relief for our customers to help them through different programs we put in place. We didn't budget for any of that this year. I'm hearing that the steamship lines are struggling with the rates really dropping again, the Trans-Pacific rates.
And those are your customers, because you're really in the service business.
Yes, we are the service business. We actually have agreements with steamship lines, and we have agreements with stevedoring companies. So there's a different dynamic there. But, we look at the average citizen as our customer too, and the retailers and the importers. Part of what's been really a positive in terms of our competitive landscaping changing is the fact that all of the stakeholders have come together. I think we're working with labor, the cargo owners in a way we never have before to address competitiveness. And so I think that's good.
That is the theme that I think we've heard elsewhere. We don't have much time left. I want to come back to sort of your personal involvement in this industry. You said a few minutes ago you're not an economist. You're a biologist. That's what you got your PhD in.
Right.
How does someone who rise from environmental scientist working for one of the ports to running the biggest port in the United States?
It was an unusual pathway, and I think that, when I came to work here, I was worried about water quality. I'd go out and test the waters and see if there was anything living there, and of course now it's teeming with life. But in order to advance in the port industry, I sort of moved out of the environmental. I went into planning, and then I went into development. But then when I got to coming back to executive director, I find that, oh my gosh, I've kind of come full circle. I'm back to where I started my career. And for all port executive directors, environmental issues are big on our agenda. I was fortunate in having that fundamental environmental background that served me well, I think, to try and deal with some of the challenges that I faced as executive director.
You have shown a lot of dedication to education in the industry. I mean, we talked a lot about community outreach and in a sense, marketing, public relations. We have lots of evidence on my campus, getting a little self-serving here from Cal State Long Beach, because the Port of Los Angeles, under your leadership, has provided a tremendous amount of support for programs that we offer. You've also been very active with MetTrans, the Metropolitan Transportation Center that we're a partner in, with a campus that I think you know slightly, University of Southern California. Yeah. I wonder why the support of that end of this industry is something that's a priority for you. For
years, I've been teaching. I've never stopped teaching.
You're still teaching, aren't you, at USC?
Well, actually, right now I had to take a break because I'm working on a project with all of the area universities that includes USC, and so I can't. I'd have a conflict if I was teaching and then working with them as a potential port customer. So we've got a major educational initiative underway here. One of our oldest historic pier, City Dock Number 1, is going to be devoted to the academic institutions for marine and maritime research, and also for entrepreneurial businesses, to those businesses that are green tech or solving the types of environmental problems we're dealing with here. We're not only doing that, but we also like to promote education among our employees. We made a significant enhancement to our tuition reimbursement program. We have many of our employees going back for masters and PhDs, some of them even getting their bachelors. So I'm a big proponent of education. I think that we need to bring government and the academics, and especially our industry, together with the academics to solve the real life problems that we're facing. And that's one thing that Cal State Long Beach has been fabulous at. We're looking at working with you on some of those far-reaching zero-emission container movement systems. So I'm pretty excited about that. There's some neat future things that we can work on together.
You used to be on the board of the Metrans Center,
Right.
Metropolitan Transportation Center, and I just wonder if you have some of the same thoughts about that group.
Yes, that was really important. What I loved about it was the research they were doing and the fact that we could come to meetings and share with, here's a problem over here. And some of the academics would say, hey, you know, I think I can go for a grant to study that particular research problem. I'm still on the advisory board of your Center for Energy and Environmental Research. And that organization is now working with the Port of Los Angeles Maritime High School that we support here. So, you know, we're unique as a port in having a maritime high school that we were involved in developing, which is right next door. This summer, we've probably got about 60 students working in this building as interns from high schools and colleges around the area, and they all have a special badge, so I can, when I get stuck in an elevator with them, I can talk to them about what they're doing for us. And for a lot of those kids, they'll come on and they'll be that's our future workforce here.
I promised you we wouldn't take too much of your time, and we've already taken more than I said I would. Besides which, you've got an event to go to that I think you said has been in the past called the Jerry and Dick Show.
Yes, every year the two ports come together, and the two port executive directors, Dick Steinke and myself, have this program where we give awards out to the businesses that operate in this port complex. These are our Clean Air Action Plan Awards, and we do it every year. This is our 4th year. As I said, we're coming to the end of our 5-year plan, and we've had to update our plan. So it's a big event. It's quite fun, and it's great to reward the customers for all that they've done for us.
Last one, I guess, that you'll be doing with Dick Steinke, who you worked for many years, and now he's your peer across the waters here at the Port of Long Beach. Any thoughts as he prepares to retire?
I expect to still see him, probably coming in as a consultant. Who knows what he's going to be doing, but I'm sure he's going to stick with the maritime industry because he's been connected to it for so long. So I'm sure our paths will continue to cross in the future.
Geraldine Knatz, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you and see the kind of enthusiasm that you have for your job and for this incredible complex that's right outside the window here. We'll let you get back to watching those ships come up and down the channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
My guest on Transcast has been Dr. Geraldine Knatz, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles. We hope you'll join us for the next edition of our show. You can also check out our library of past programs at metrans.org. That's metrans.org. Transcast is a production of the Metrans Transportation Center, which is funded by the United States Department of Transportation and the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans. Thanks for listening.